All right, we'll get started here in just a couple minutes. We'll let people get logged in. Just gonna do. All right, I'm just gonna do kind of quick audio test. Looks like audio is passing. All right, if you're watching this live, feel free to go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. My name is Greg Ondo. I live in Northern Virginia. That's where I'm kind of presenting from. Just outside Washington, D.C. So if you want to, feel free to introduce yourself in the comments field. Feel free to introduce yourself. If you have questions, please feel free to ask in the comments field as well. We had some people that submitted some questions in advance, so we'll go through that. If you're watching this offline, not live, you don't need to introduce yourself if you don't want to. It's primarily for the benefit. And if you're watching this offline, we're going to let people get logged in, ask some questions, and then we'll get started maybe in about 10 minutes. Usually takes about that long to collect some questions and get everyone logged in. So we'll go ahead and just wait. We see people coming in. All right, I see Sal online. Good to see you, Sal. We have Las Vegas. We have Taylor from Pine Grove, Pennsylvania. All right, we have Sweden, Liverpool. Terry from Liverpool. All right. We have Atlanta. All right, we have India in the house. Okay, just collecting some of the questions. I'll copy in advance. I saw a question if this could be for Cubase artist questions as well as just Cubase Pro. Definitely for Cubase artist as well. All right, we have York, UK, Finland, Sherman Oaks. A lot of users in Sherman Oaks. We have Quebec, India, Istanbul. Okay. Okay, so getting people logged in. It's great. Okay, we have a question on pitch correction. All right, let's from Wales, Kenya, South Bend, Indiana, Orlando. Good to see you, Vinny. All right, we have Nashville, Bangladesh, Sweden, Italy. All right, we have Fort Washington. It's right across the river from where I live in Alexandria. We have Tel Aviv. Okay, we have a question about external equipment, so we'll show that. Okay, we have a question on cycle markers, which will tie in nicely to another question we have on cycle markers from Taylor. Okay, we have Los Angeles, Germany, Switzerland, So we had a question about did someone miss the 30th year sales? Will Cubase go on sale again? I'm not sure. That might have been a special sale. It's, there's going to be different promotions throughout the year, but you could always contact your retailer. Okay, so we have Sweden again. Okay, so we have Cubase Elements, pitch correction, a couple questions on that. Canada. Okay, we have a question about sending and returning external effects in Artist 10. There's no VST tab. It is, the external effects are just a part of the Pro version. So you might have to just kind of manually route it. All right, we have Daytona Beach. All right, India, another Swede. All right, more people from Bangladesh. That's great. Okay, so using external consoles as an effect. All right, we have Netherlands. Okay, so we have a question. What are the differences between Cubase Pro and the educational version, the EDU? If I want to upgrade Cubase EDU, we'll change it to retail license. The functionality will be identical, but I don't think there's any educational discounts on the updates, since that was kind of already, the discount was applied during the initial purchase. Okay, so we have Ontario, excuse me, Rome, New Jersey, all right, Texas, another Canada. Okay, so we had a quick question about the version licenses. It says, I've purchased the Elements to Pro upgrade. I only have the Pro license, but I can still run Elements. Is that intended, temporary bug, or what's the deal? I think it's intended to where you could just run the Pro version, but if you're running Elements, I won't tell. All right, we have Germany. All right, let's see if maybe the sound is back. Just going to check to see if we're having audio. All right, I'm just going to check the audio. Okay. So I think audio seems... Sorry about the audio. Just some reason my audio system, which has worked flawlessly for years, has decided not to be a little bit unstable. So it's kind of a complicated setup to get the audio for the Hangouts to work. So I'll try to keep an eye out for the sound. So just let me know. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with some of the questions. I'll try to keep my eyes out for the comments on sound as well, but let me just set a placeholder in the comments so we can kind of go back. Okay, so some of the questions we had sent in. Okay, so we had a question on track presets. Can I save a track preset that contains an audio track and an effects track? Situation: audio track has an amp simulator, audio track has effects send to an effects channel with reverb. I want to save it all as one track preset. So when you're working with this, one of the things that you want to do is just make sure, you know, when you're doing track presets will save, you know, the inserts, EQs, the pre-section of the channel strip, but it doesn't necessarily save the send. So if I wanted to save a setting, and to save a track preset, you could just literally come right over here and just say save track preset and give it a name and call it up and be able to access. And you could save multiple tracks as presets. So, but you could save instrument and audio and MIDI tracks as track presets. But if you wanted to save both the effects channels, let's say if I have a reverb and this effect, and that's what is needed to make the sound, what we could do is to export the selected tracks. So we'll just reference the media files. At this point, I'll just call it June Hangout. Then if I go to a new project, I could, and it's kind of a different name, so it could be a little confusing. I could just say, let's import, and then it's going to be called import a track archive. And now I could just import my June Hangout. It'll give me the choices of my audio and effects. And at this point, it'll import, and we can see that this send will, if that was the right one, but you could import the send going to the particular track and the send there. So instead of using track presets, you know, and what some people do is just kind of will treat their inserts as sends in situations like that, but you could choose to export multiple tracks again as export selected tracks and import the track archive, and then you should be able to be able to import both the audio tracks as well as like the effects channels. All right, next question we had. Does anyone know how to import exported kit with samples to Groove Agent? I have exported a new kit with samples to my documents on a Mac, and now I can't find a way to import it. So if I've made a new instance of let's say a Groove Agent kit, so I'll just drag this over here and we'll make a new kit. So we'll just get the instrument loaded up, and let's say if I go through some of my different library sounds, what I could do is I'll just go to different loops and samples, and I'll just kind of look for, maybe we'll start with just to say I want to do just kicks. So let's say if I wanted my snare, and I wanted that on this pad, and I wanted, let's say, a kick onto this pad, and let's say a clap onto this pad. So now what I could do is I could export the kit, and I could export all programs. So if I export kit, we will just call this June 2019 kit. Okay. And then I'm just going to hit OK. Okay. And we can give it an author name. So I will just kind of give it some additional metadata. Okay, so now when I wanted to come here, if I did everything right, and I wanted to import the kit, let's say if I just, now we will cut that kit, and let's go ahead and load a kit. And at this point, I'm just going to type in the name June, and let me see if I just checked them. I may have to go through different user presets as well. But once you kind of export it at that point, let me just come directly to my MediaBay, and I think if we just look at it here, we could see our kits will be loaded into user content if I did it correctly. So let's come to my VST3 presets, to Steinberg, to Groove Agent SE. And here's some other ones that I had saved before, but you could now just have like your different kits that could be loaded up directly onto the pads here. So again, just when you come here, just you wanted to, I think you could even export the kit or export all programs, and then that will be visible in the user presets area. Okay, so we had a question or a comment. Could you please kindly request developers to add 2 sliders to the MIDI track inspector? And it's that right. All right, I'm just going to check, make sure we have audio. Sorry about this. Okay, so it looks like we have our audio back. Okay. Okay, so sorry about that. We'll try to deal with this as best as we can. All right, I appreciate everyone's patience with that. So that might be a way just within the editor to adjust the start and end position. I could understand how you may want kind of a way to do that, but it could be parts where you just kind of program and sequence stuff like that, because it might change depending on a particular part. So another question was how to use an insert as multi-mono on a stereo track. Example, a compressor on the mix bus, so it treats independently the right and left side when a plugin has no unlink option available. So one thing that a lot of people don't know necessarily is when, let's say if we wanted to go to, let's say to our mix console, and I wanted to go to my master fader here. And let's say if I just put a really bad EQ as an insert here. So I'll just put on a studio EQ. I'll do something really obnoxious like this. Okay, now if I have that selected on the inserts, you could click on this routing tab. And if I wanted this to be only mono, where it's only going to affect one channel. Now, once we have the routing tab selected as opposed to the inserts, you could also just kind of click here and you could choose whether you want it to be default stereo or to mono, or go to the open routing editor. Here we could unlink. So if I wanted the effect to go on the right channel, I could, as I'm playing, so this way you could choose which channel, or if you only want it to be processed on one channel. So you may have to, if you wanted to, so if you need to process, like on the master bus, your left and right channel independently, and the plugin itself doesn't have that capability, what you'd probably would want to do is to run 2 instances of the plugin, and at that point just go to the routing. You could choose to have them be mono, running 2 instances, and then you could have separate settings if your plugin doesn't allow it. So on the inserts, go to like the channel editor and just go to the routing. You could have it switch to mono automatically, or open your routing editor as well. So that way on a stereo track or a 5.1 track, you could choose exactly which channels are processed through that particular insert effect. So hope that was helpful. I think that'll do the trick. Okay, so someone was asking about how to change some of the MediaBay settings. So for tagging, so let's say if we wanted to come here and change the tagging of particular effects or presets. So a lot of times when we go to particular plugins, you could say, okay, I wanted to go to my factory content, and let's say I wanted to now come over here to, let's say, let me just find a quick instrument. So let's say, okay, I come here to Pad Shop. We'll just scroll down. Okay, so we have Pad Shop. And then we could have our rating system here for if we really like particular plugins, presets, or if we don't like particular presets. So you could set a rating, and it'll default to 3 stars. And then you could actually say, if you come up to the top, you could choose whether you want it to be 1 star, 2 star, or 3 or 4 up to 5 stars. So you could kind of rate stuff. But if you wanted to quickly change a number of presets, you could just come there and say, I want these all to be 3 stars, 4 stars. Then when you're searching, you could say, I only want to look for 5-star, only want to look for 4-star presets that you've kind of gone through. So if you take some time, like when you get a new plugin and you're going through different presets, you know, you could easily kind of say, I don't like this, I really like this, I could use this, and then you can say search for 5 stars, search for 1 star. So that's an easy way of being able to do that. Okay, so we had a question on how to go from mono to stereo using convert tracks. And this was a new function that was kind of introduced in Cubase 10. So let's take a quick look at it. So I'm just going to jump back. And let's open up a specific project to show this. Okay, so let's say if we have like a stereo acoustic guitar part here, so we'll just, and if we wanted to split that particular track to 2 mono tracks, what I could do now is I could select the particular track, not necessarily the event. This is going to be based on the track selection. And if you go to project, there's a convert tracks function. So here we could actually say I want to do multi-channel to mono. And we'll get some different options. So we could say I want to do selected tracks. I want to do all multi-mono, all stereo or 5.1 tracks. And at this point, I want to keep the source tracks as they are. I want to mute them, delete them, or create the new tracks into a new project. You could have different naming conventions. So, and now, so if once I have that done, we could take our stereo, and now we have 2 monos. And conversely, if I want to take 2 monos and turn those into a stereo track, I could just say we want to do the opposite, which is mono to multi-channel. Now, you want to make sure that you have the destination format selected here. If this is blank, you may get a message, kind of a cryptic message like this. And that's because the destination path hasn't been defined. So because it doesn't know if you want to do stereo, quad, you know, LCR, or, you know, 5.1. So when we say convert tracks, we can say mono to multi-channel, the destination format, we select this as stereo, and then we could have a stereo track just automatically created. So if you get that error message, make sure that when you do the convert tracks, like the mono to multi-channel, that you have the destination format defined. And for a lot of cases, stereo would do the trick, and then that would help with that. Okay, we had a question also emailed, how to convert a click track to an audio. So let's say if I come here and I have a signature track, so I will just kind of scroll up here. I'm going to right click, or you could actually just click here, and we're going to add a signature track. So we have 4/4, and let's say if I just turn on and I have my click track going, and let's say at this point I wanted to put in a different meter, I could just kind of click directly here on my signature track and say, okay, I want this to be 5/4. I wanted this to be, let's say right at this point, I wanted to be 3/4. Let's say here, 2/4. So if we have kind of different time signatures and we wanted to render a click track accordingly, The little trick is when you go to the signature track, so you could just simply come right here and you see the little drop down menu, and then you could just say render an audio click between the left and right locators. So I can set my left and right locators. I'm just going to do that manually. And then I say render my audio click between the locators. And then as we do this, let me just make sure I did it correctly. That will automatically add that particular track. Let me make sure this is actually turned on to follow. But that's all you have to do is just simply choose the render audio click directly there. Okay, we had a question in Halion 6 of how to add a new layer to a preset. So let me come over here and let's load up Halion 6. So someone wanted to kind of make a quick kind of enhancing the sound. So I'm just going to come directly here. We will just go to our sampler and let's load up a Halion 6 here. So if you want to take an existing sound and add like another layer or different sound element. Okay, so at this point, let me just find a particular preset. Okay, so we will do this, and Halion is sold separately. So all right, so let's say if I wanted to add maybe like a percussive element to this. So I could select on kind of the program tree here, and then I'm going to select this, and we'll just choose to do a new layer. So we have layer 2 here, and we could kind of call this whatever we want. I will now just kind of go through, find maybe a quick percussive sound. So say kick drum. Just okay, so let's say I wanted to add that into this sound. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just drag this particular sample right into that layer. And now every time. And if we wanted to just solo that particular sound, so at that point, that is now added directly into the layer. So that's an easy way. So once you have a preset or you're just creating a sound, this would allow you to combine samples and, you know, multiple forms of synthesis all in one. And if you wanted to layer another sound on top of that, again, just kind of drag that sound right in. Just like that. All right, we had a question sent in about exporting multiple audio parts as regions. So let me see if I want to come here and we'll do a new project. And this, I think, is very helpful if you're doing sound design, like for samples, or if you're working with, you know, different cues for a film. So let's come over here and we'll just import a couple of different loop sounds. All right, let me me just see if I can find. Let's say if I come here. Okay, so let's say if I had multiple copies of this and these were all, completely different sound files, and I'll just copy this, just hold down my Alt key. Okay, and I wanted to export each of these as a single, as separate entities in kind of more of an automated way. So what we could do is we can now just come over here, and I created a macro. So when I come over here, I'm going to go to my key commands, and I think I made this macro just this morning here. So I think I called it a multi-cycle marker. So one of the things that you can do in Cubase Pro is you could export based on cycle markers. And what I want to do is to now at this point, I'm just going to add a marker track. So I could right click here and add just a blank marker track. So I can see my left and right locators kind of, encompassing more than what we have here that are kind of doing the whole thing. So what I wanted to do is to have a macro that would, select the event. And we'll take a look at the settings here. So just to select the event, we can say locators to selection, and that puts the left, that will create the left and right locators around the event. And then to have it insert a cycle marker automatically and then go to the right, which would go to the next event. So if I had a bunch of sounds here that I wanted to export independently, here's a way to do it. So I assigned a key command to the macro, and I'm just going to open it up to refresh my memory. So as we wanted to look at this, we could just say, we'll go look at my macro, and we called it the, I think it's a multi-cycle marker. So I just put Command Control Option C. So what I'm going to do is just select this very first event. And then I'm just going to hold this down. I'm going to hit the C key. And we can see that this set the left and right locators around the event and added a cycle marker. Then I could just hit the C key. I could hold down and just kind of hit that key command multiple times. And at that point, it would just automatically add the cycle markers. Now, the cycle markers are just numbered, but if you wanted to actually rename the markers, you could select the marker track and hit the E key, and you could just go to the description area here. So now, if we have a description, I could just tab a couple times, hit my description field, etc. So I'll just type in some gibberish here just to add some data. All right, so when I go to export, so I got one project, the cycle markers have been automatically created, but when I go to my file menu and choose export audio mixdown, at this point, we could just say, I wanted to export between cycle markers, and I could just choose all of the cycle markers that were created, and the name from that cycle marker will automatically be incorporated within the audio file itself. So that's an easy way to kind of have the naming and be able to deal with situations like that. So if you work maybe with non-linear audio, that's a great function. Again, if you want to see that macro, just go to, I have it just set up. And a lot of times these macros, you could actually, just have, and you hit the key command over and over again. And at that point, it's going to just automatically do the same function. So instead of, You don't have to necessarily, do a lot of work to have it just kind of repeat that process. So if you want to do like create multi-cycle markers for exports, you could also do, so again, it's transport locators to selection, transport insert cycle marker, and then navigate to the right. So we had a question, can we put a delay effect just on a single MIDI note? So it's kind of an interesting question, and a lot of times when we do delays, we could think of that as being more for when we have, let's say, a particular note event here. Let's just kind of zoom in just a little bit. So let's say if we have different chords that are going on here. So at this point, there are a couple of things we could do for a particular MIDI event. So if I wanted to go to the track, you could, let's see if we go to, there's a MIDI delay, MIDI plugin. So let's say, and it's often called MIDI echo. So let's see what functions are directly here. So we may not be able to just have this be a particular note. Let's take a look at some of the other so it looks like this will kind of be global. So let's say if I just wanted to have that would be global. You, depending on the MIDI plugin, you may be able to also, depending on the source, you may be able to see different effects that could be handled through different expressions. So if we wanted to come here, you could try to see if we could go directly there. A lot of people would just simply treat, have the MIDI note on a separate track and just do automation. One trick that a lot of people also do that's really handy, and I'll just kind of blow this up to make it a little more visible. If we wanted to just extend a particular note, and if we wanted to do, and let's say our note is this long, and from here I just wanted to create like delays. So let's say, I can see, so let's say I split this note at measure 11, and if I switch my, let's say my snap value, let's say to 16th notes, I could come here and hold down the option key, and that would automatically split the notes. And if I come here, I could then hold down, grab my glue tool, and from that point, just simply, take that and have that note kind of rest. So that's a way. Some people would do traditional audio automation, but for particular types of MIDI editing, holding down kind of the Alt, splitting and hold down the Alt at a particular rhythmic interval is also a really good choice. Some instruments you may be able to double click, and if they respond to note expression with the effects. I don't know a lot of instruments that currently do that. You could have kind of a delay that would be on one note but not the other notes, but you may find it just quicker just to kind of split according to like your snap values there. So okay, so we have some more questions. I know we have, we'll get to as many questions as we can. We hope that all the audio equipment is going to be stable here. Okay, so we had a question about live performance. A lot of people will set up Cubase for, you can do great live performance with it. I've seen a lot of like, Las Vegas shows and whatnot that were just, almost entirely automated within Cubase. And if you're doing live performance, one of the things that's really helpful is to have the capability to come directly here and using like the arranger track. So if I wanted to add an arranger track here, I could just kind of take my different parts of song, and let's say if I have like one big project that is all of my different tracks, so let's say this is songs 1 through 6 and this is my set, but maybe I want to actually change the set periodically. So we could create kind of different arranger chains. So let's say this is set 1. And then if I wanted to, let's say, duplicate this chain, and for the next night, I just wanted to change the order of these particular songs, you could do that. And this will have it play back in kind of a non-linear fashion. So as we kind of go, we could have, set 1, set 2, or variations of these. And one thing that a lot of people miss, it's kind of hidden almost, is if you go to the generic remote setup, you could go directly to the arranger track here. So you could take different MIDI note messages, and let's say if we go to command and go to arranger, you could have it, trigger up to 20 different arranger events. So at that point, you could have a MIDI note that will go directly to a particular song if you wanted to control it from like a MIDI foot pedal, or go to the next chain step, repeat, activate. So you could do a lot of these things through MIDI already. So for live use, a lot of people end up using the arranger track to great advantage, and it gives you a lot of flexibility without having to move everything, because you could work where it'll play back in a non-linear order. Okay, so we had a question on pitch correction in Cubase Elements. So we see very powerful pitch correction. So that comes with VariAudio, and that's found in the full Cubase version. And obviously there's a lot of people that have Cubase Elements, and I want to say that there's a plugin, while it's not graphic pitch based correction. So if you have worked with the VariAudio and the Cubase Pro, we can just kind of select right here, and then we could see graphic pitch editing that's really pretty amazing and comprehensive to easily edit stuff. But if you have the Cubase Elements, I think that there is a plugin under Pitch Shift, and I could be mistaken about this, called Pitch Correct. And here you could basically, set it to chromatic or a particular key and have that run in real time directly with that, so that you could, have it kind of snap directly to key. You could also have this, have it follow a particular MIDI scale or a MIDI note, so you could actually kind of play it from a controller in real time. So as soon as that is active, you could add a MIDI track. And let's say as we add a MIDI track, we could set its input to come from, I think once you have that kind of set up, you might be able to just take, I thought it was available maybe as a MIDI input. But at that point, you could, just kind of take your MIDI and, so try experimenting if you have like the Cubase Element version to work with the pitch correct plugins. I think that's available in there. Okay, working with external gear. So if you have a favorite compressor, a favorite EQ, a favorite keyboard or drum machine that you wanted to incorporate, and this is something that's often found in the Cubase Pro version. We'll show you a couple ways to be able to access in other versions after. But if we go to your studio to audio connections, at this point we can see external effects and external instruments. So let's say if I was sampling my HR16 drum machine from 30 years ago almost. And then I could connect this to available inputs and outputs on my audio interface. Conversely, I could also, or in addition, I could have external effects. So if I have like an 1176, I could pick and choose what inputs and outputs on my audio interface that I have that piece of hardware connected to. Now, as I do this, if I wanted to come here and go to an external processor, what we could do is just simply come here and say, okay, I want it my 1176, and that's now will be within the signal flow, and it's going to basically within this send, after the pitch correct plugin, send that to my 1176, which is routed to outputs. It gets processed and then fed back to inputs, and we could access our external effects like that. Now, this could cause some latency issues, so we actually give a ping function. So this would allow you to just simply come here, and that would offset any of the latency that's been imposed by the signal chain. Sometimes it's not noticeable. Some older reverbs may have their own latency within their A to D and D to A conversion, but that will allow you to do that. And if I wanted to have an external instrument, I could just come here and I say I wanted to access my drum machine. At this point, I could have my external instrument and be able to access it like through a MIDI track and send MIDI data to it and have the outputs from this connected to inputs. Now, when using external instruments and external processing gear, it may make sense to have an audio interface with lots of inputs and outputs. I know many people that will have 64 inputs and outputs just for external effects processing if they have a lot of outboard gear that they want to use. So that's another, so be aware of that. Now, if you have Cubase Artist, you know, what some people do with that is just to, like, for an external instrument, what they would do is just simply create a stereo audio track. Okay. Have that audio track in monitor mode, send out a MIDI track out to that device, and you have the outputs connected, and you just leave that track in monitor enable, and then the audio would play back. If you're doing this for external gear and you don't have Cubase Pro, what you could do is create a group channel. So we'll just add a group channel. On this group channel, we're going to need to use audio connections. So I'm just going to add, let's say, a stereo out. So what I want to do is to route this particular channel. We'll just choose our routing here. I want this to go to stereo out to, and then what we could do is on this particular track, I go to my sends, and then this would go to group 3. So group 3, I send this to group 3. Group 3 is going out directly to my stereo out, and then create another audio track, a stereo as a return that you could monitor enable. Now that won't automatically compensate for the latency, but if you have Cubase Artist or Elements and really want to do that and don't want to upgrade to the Cubase Pro, you could just kind of route it kind of more manually and still kind of get the same function. So if you're doing Cubase Pro, it's a little more consolidated, but you can still kind of get the same functionality. Just see a quick question and comments. So VariAudio is not in Elements 9.5. That's correct. We see VariAudio. VariAudio is just a function of the Cubase Pro. So, okay, so we can see. All right, we're going to go over to some of the comments. We have a lot of great questions, and we're going to try to get through all of them. So, okay, so we had a question on looking for like an advanced VariAudio 3 course. So let's go ahead and we'll show you some tips and tricks on VariAudio. And, when we see version 10 that introduced a lot of new functionality into VariAudio. So let's go ahead and we'll just kind of make it really big. So you could take an audio file here, and we could say, go to the VariAudio tab, and you could click on Edit VariAudio, and it will do a quick analysis. Now, you could actually, since my project has a chord track in it here, one of the cool things is we could have the VariAudio automatically kind of follow paradigms and coloring schemes based on a chord track, where green notes are within the chord, red notes are out of key, and blue notes are within the scale. So one of the things that we want to do is kind of make things a bit more consolidated. So if I wanted to come here, we'll just kind of go back to the beginning of this particular song. All right, so we'll just take a look at this, and we'll zoom in a little bit so we can see it a little better. All right, let's see. And I may have sent this out to a bunch of groups. I'm just going to revert this project really quick since I've messed it up in many ways. Okay, so now we're kind of starting from a known entity. So double click, and we'll just make it larger here and activate our VariAudio. So if I wanted to, let's just take a look at some of the different. So there's two different modes. So you could say smart controls, where you say there's default smart controls. Just switch it to all, because that'll give you kind of more functions. So as I just kind of select a range of notes, it used to be that we would have to kind of come over here to the right-hand side and quantize the pitch or straighten the curve for vibrato. But if we wanted to actually kind of do this using smart controls, I could now select the group of notes, and if I wanted to just kind of have it snap, I could do that. One of the new basic modes is the pitch snap mode. It used to be set to relative in previous versions, which is a little annoying to me, because if a note was, let's say, out of tune, so if a note was out of tune and I moved the particular note, what it would do is it would actually just kind of draw in. Let me just jump that one more time here. So, and I moved a note, it would move the note to being the same amount out of tune, but one semitone or semitone up or down, but the same amount out of tune. So now you could, when you come here, you could just have it snap to absolute, and this would just kind of knock that note in tune. If you hold down the shift key, you could actually just move the note freely anywhere that you want. So, and as I said before, to kind of take multiple notes, you would, in previous versions, you would have to just come over here and quantize the pitch. But now we have this smart control at the bottom, and that will allow you to take the selected notes and come here and just adjust the pitch like that. So we could have that kind of snap to the nearest note. The upper note, the upper center portion, so the bottom would be our quantized pitch. If we wanted to straighten the curve of particular notes, so say these two notes, I could grab the upper center, and that would get rid of our vibrato in essence. So we could adjust the straighten curve. You could still kind of come over here and adjust accordingly, but it makes it so much easier just to do it like this. If I wanted to set a particular, you may notice that at the end of phrases, singers may tend to drift a little flat. So let's listen to this particular phrase here. So if someone is drifting flat, if I kind of go to the bottom where this is actually detecting a different pitch, I can now just go to the bottom or to the end of a note, and I could choose to glue together. So it's like a smart tool that automatically turns. Or if I wanted to split particular notes, I could go to the bottom edge here, and we say it turns into like a pencil tool. So at the very edge to the next segment, a glue, or we could go to the bottom and it turns into like a pencil tool. If I wanted to set different points where if I wanted to grab this particular edge, we could adjust the pitch like so. And if we wanted to set an anchor point, at that point, I could move the diamond here. And now I could say we're only going to adjust the pitch up from where that anchor point or diamond is based. So as we adjust, we could set your different anchor points like so. And if you hold down like the Alt key or Option key, you could choose to tilt the pitch of the notes just like that. So very easy. Now, when you go to the bottom or the edges, you could adjust kind of the segment. So if the note's a little too long or a little too short, you could adjust the length of the pitch accordingly. Conversely, we could also adjust the start point directly to the known center. And if we go to the lower left-hand corner, here we could shift formants, and the lower right-hand corner, we could shift the volume. So it's very fast and very easy. You get really kind of wonderful results kind of using the VariAudio. And, 90% of the time, you could just kind of select a range that's a little annoying and just kind of quantize the pitch and make sure that, your transitions are good. And that will do quite a bit, So, and also, as you come here, we could say, I just want to take just, speaking of transitions, if I move these little triangles in of these particular notes, let's say I select this note and I adjust the triangles. And as I adjust the straighten curve, it won't affect the transition of going in or out of that. So I could adjust just that particular transition like so. Now, I saw a question kind of come up about, what if you're tuning to 432 or 442, if that's your tuning reference, really all you'd have to do is you could go to your fine tune here. And if you're doing 432, just set that to -8. And at that point, everything you're doing will be working at a 432 tuning reference. If you're working at 442, I know some people, I think Stevie Wonder is a big stickler on A is 442 to him. You could just adjust the fine tune up, and then as you make the adjustments within VariAudio, you could make those adjustments and still have it comply to kind of different tuning different tuning or reference frequencies for your A. So that's kind of an easy way of working with that. So let's go ahead and go through some more questions. Okay, I'm just going to go through. We have lots of questions we're going to try to catch up on. Thanks for everyone's patience. Okay. Okay, I saw stacked recordings in the old version. Can we do that in Cubase 10 Pro? So yeah, so if we have stacked recordings, I'll just kind of show an example here. Okay, let me just see if it's... Okay, so when you record audio and it's in a cycle mode and you want to be able to, create kind of the best performance, when as you record audio and it repeats like and does different passes, these will show up into different lanes, and we could activate the lanes by clicking on this icon here. So at this point, we could choose the little hand tool and we could select kind of different versions that you want to. And now when we close this will be kind of our comped version of that particular take. So you could listen to it if you wanted to, hold down the like command key and find the different best take. So in this way you could just kind of make your favorite, comp performance very easily and say, oh, I like this one going into that. So that's how you could kind of work with your stacked mode. Now, a question I have when often get is when people have everything in lanes and they need to pass it on to someone that maybe isn't smart enough to be running Cubase. How do I take these lanes and give them to different musicians? At that point, we could choose to say create tracks from lanes, and now we could have independent tracks where different elements can be muted to indicate where the comp that we intended was, but still have all the other files present. So again, to do that, you could select all the lanes like so and right click and choose to create tracks from lanes. Okay, so let's go ahead and go through some more questions. Thanks everyone for great questions and for patience. Okay, so we had a question. Many keyboards says, hello, many keyboards controllers not available in Cubase 10 Pro. Example, Nectar, Edirol, PCR 800, Novation. We have to manually update map. Any other plans for a fast setup? I know it's something that we've been discussing, but it's, sometimes it's tough for us to, come up with functions for every keyboard controller because they're all kind of doing different things. So, sometimes it might be the responsibility of the controller company to make sure that things work. And one of the things that we do have is a control SDK. So, you'll see a lot of controllers that are, you could put it into Cubase mode, like the Nectar that you mentioned. Will have a lot of that function. But when we go to remote devices, we do have a software development kit that the companies can use to do that, and they know what the functions of their controller are intended to do and can create unique functionalities for that. So sometimes it's hard for us to come up with all the features for every controller. We don't get access to every controller, so it's really a lot of times up to the keyboard controller companies, and a lot of them will have different preset modes for different programs. So, but I think, it's kind of a theme that we may see addressed. I know there's been some discussion on how to, better utilize different controllers. But, you should kind of look now to the controller companies as well. Okay. Okay, so we'll go through some more of the questions. Okay, thanks for everyone's patience with questions. Okay, so we had a question. Please make the MixConsole smaller, like Cubase 8. So a lot of times when you're in the MixConsole, let's just switch back to kind of a full project here, and we'll activate this. So the MixConsole is really scalable to kind of whatever size, since version 7. And maybe I'm misunderstanding, but if you wanted to come to the MixConsole view here, if you want to see it smaller, you could just zoom in and out. So if you have like horrible eyesight like myself, this is like the Mr. Magoo size, or if you wanted to see more faders at once, you could just hit G and H to zoom in and out, just like you would on the main project window. If you have the full view MixConsole, and again, this is all scalable as well, kind of horizontally, or if you wanted to take a particular, as we do this, the MixConsole is completely scalable. So I don't think that function has changed, but make sure that if you're doing that if you have the MixConsole as the active window, that you're just using G and H to make the MixConsole smaller. And there's also, once we're in the MixConsole, you could choose to deactivate, particular functions. So if you say, I don't want to see my channel overview, I don't want to see my meter bridge, I don't want to see notepad or my channel latency, I don't want to see the control room, I'm not using that, or the channel selector, all that functionality, you could just kind of pick and choose these different components that are visible kind of, directly from this little drop down window, your setup window layout. So it should be the same. I don't think anything's really changed from version 8, so you may want to check that out. Okay, so we have a question. Why in audio connections I can only exclusively have connected either control room monitor left right or output stereo left right? I have Pro 10 and a Scarlett 2i2. Okay, so sometimes when you work in the control room, you may not have the ability to have like multiple connections for the same physical output ports. So to remedy that, if we go to Preferences, to Control Room, so just kind of, okay, you'll see exclusive device ports for monitor channels. So now if I have my connections set up, I can't, that'll be grayed out and unavailable as a choice because I have it defined here. But as soon as I adjust that preference, and again, we come directly here to under VST to Control Room and uncheck exclusive device ports for monitor channels. At that point, then I could doubly bus the settings there. So if you wanted to go out of your main stereo outs as well as the control room, you could do that. So once again, you go to your file menu, to preferences, control room, and unchecked exclusive device ports for monitor channels. Okay. Just reading through some different comments. Okay, so just reading through comments. Thanks for your patience. All right, I'm just going to check the audio here in just a second. And okay, so I think we have the audio back. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's go back to our point that we were looking at. Okay, so the question was about adding a track or input track. By default, it takes the pre-gain. So I'm just going to do a new project. I'm not sure if I've seen that. So if I add an audio track, let's just say I'll add 4 audio tracks. So none of the pre-gains have been set up. Let me see if I change the settings and add a particular track on top, if that makes any adjustment. So if I just come here, let's add an audio track. So if I understand a question, that it seems like it's automatically changing that. So I'm not sure if you're doing it directly from track presets or templates. So, but it doesn't seem to be doing it for me on the settings. All right, so let's come over here and let's go through some more questions. If I'm misunderstanding your question about the pre-gain and adding tracks, just let me know. Okay, so it says, hello from Sweden. Is there a way to save multiple tracks, instrument tracks, as a preset while maintaining all settings of the tracks and plugins, third-party plugins? to open within another project. So one of the things that you could do is, if you have a number of those things set up, is select everything, and this includes instrument tracks. Let's say if I have a retro log on, and if I wanted to come here, let's add an effects channel. And we talked about this a bit earlier, but we could just come right here, select all the tracks, and we could import. We could export the selected tracks. And again, we'll just call it. And now if I'm in a different project, let's say this is my active project. I could choose to import my track archive. So let's just say this is our one we just saved. I could open that up. It'll allow me to take my instrument effects and audio tracks and import it directly into this particular project. Conversely, another method is just to choose, once the project is saved, is to import tracks from project. So I could just select a different project. So let's say at this point, if I come here, I will have this particular project. I could now import the tracks to a new track from the other projects and have all those settings. So there's two different ways of kind of doing it to maintain kind of the different settings for you. All right, so we're seeing a couple people that are first time here as a Cubase Pro 10 user. Yeah, we had an incredibly successful campaign last month celebrating the 30th anniversary. Okay. I apologize for sound kind of coming in and out of systems, but at least we're able to kind of recover this time. It's kind of a bummer when it doesn't. So we have a question: is there any way of recording VSTi to audio while automating them? So let's go ahead and we'll just set up a new project and we can show you how to do this. There's a couple different ways. All right, so we'll see what this. Okay, so I'm going to, there's a couple ways. One easy way of doing this, and I usually kind of keep an extra couple of groups available. So I'm going to just, within a project. So I'm going to just say, let's add track. And then I'm going to add an audio track. Okay, so now as I play a note, what I want to do is to take the retro log track, and we could, through either the output routing here for the audio, at this point I could just say, let's send it directly to a group, or within a send, I could choose to route it directly to the group. So now when I play this particular note, we see that the audio is coming out of the VSTi. It's going into the group. And now for the audio track, I'm going to set its input to group 1. So now if I just kind of come here and play note. So we've done a routing. So let's say if I want to just play a note, I'll put this track into record. And automated a parameter. So now when we go to look at it, we can now just listen to this particular audio track. And you could hear kind of the different filter changes as you do that. So again, we just take the VST instrument. We could route it to an analog, like an output bus or to a group. Take that group. And then we're going to take the audio track and set that input to group. So this way you could actually record MIDI and audio simultaneously to your VST instruments. Okay, thanks for questions. Just going to check. Okay, so let's get to next question. MixConsole vertical spacing is too much. Can't see everything when zoomed out. It was great in Cubase 8, but now I'm forced to scroll up and down all the time, which defeats the purpose. Okay, so I think just kind of getting back to our question. So the vertical spacing is too much. Just simply, you could adjust the different sections accordingly. So if you wanted to see more of this, more of, different areas of the screen, we can just kind of select. So if I want bigger meters, each of these sections can be resized kind of as you see fit. So if the vertical spacing is off, you can just try to adjust accordingly. So give that a try and still see. Okay, so we had a question. Does anybody know what the function of the MIDI channel faders are? So the MIDI channel faders are just actually going to record MIDI CC data. So a lot of people are like, okay, why do you need that in the world of VST instruments if you're still doing external, hardware that doesn't respond to automation, traditional audio automation, because it's just a MIDI device that's generating tone? Then that's when you would want to use the MIDI faders for that. Okay, scroll through some more comments. Thanks everyone for your patience and for great questions and for dealing with the audio dropouts. I'm glad we were able to kind of recover today. So we'll keep going. Thanks again. Appreciate it. Okay. Okay, so we had a compliment on my style of presentation. I'm glad it's easy to understand. Hopefully everyone's learning a couple tips and tricks. It says, Greg, can you go through the process of bouncing audio to video? Currently, it's not in the current Cubase version. When we came out with, I think, Cubase 9.03, there was a new video engine that was introduced at that time. So we kind of redesigned and, started from scratch with a new video engine. There used to be a functionality in previous versions that was replace audio and video file. It will be coming back. I'm not sure exactly when. It's been announced for the latest version of Cubase 10, or I'm not Cubase 10, rather, but Nuendo 10 has been announced to incorporate that functionality, and I think maybe we might see it coming in future versions of Cubase usually. But we'll see it coming, but currently you can't show it. If you absolutely need that function, you can download a previous version like a 902 or earlier, like version 8, 8.5, and then you could replace the audio and video file. So I know the guys are working hard on getting the functionality restored. So I apologize that it's not in there, and we get this question a lot. So, but they want to do it correctly and do it right. Okay, so we had a question about letting us know how to use external hardware as effects in Cubase, and we kind of discussed this a little bit earlier, but in case we missed it, all we'd have to do, and this is found in the Cubase Pro version, but you could have under the audio connections, under the Studio tab, here we could have different, and you could label them whatever you want. And what we wanted to define is the inputs and outputs where that external effect is connected to your audio interface. And then at that point, we could just go to the audio track and call these up under the external plugins tab. And you see this function here to ping the system to automatically do the delay compensation. We talked about some methods if you have like Cubase Elements or Cubase Artist to kind of get similar functionality. It may not do the complete delay compensation, but you can still access it. And we did that earlier in the Hangout, so I won't repeat it for everyone that just saw it a little bit. Any question to get option to revert vertical scrolling in Cubase? So let's say if I let's take a quick look, and this could be something that maybe is done through, like, let's say if I have a number of audio tracks and I could scroll up and down. I'm just going to reread question here. So let me just check. So I see to revert the vertical scrolling. So again, it's I'm just reading it. Any chance to get option to revert vertical scrolling in Cubase? Pretty please. So I think that's work. I'm just using kind of the mouse scroll wheel, but if I have a number of tracks, that seems to be doing vertical scrolling. So maybe if I'm misunderstanding, if you could just add another comment to the question, that would be great. So we have a question. Can you tell me some plugins for only vocals? I wouldn't say that, there's plugins only for vocals. There's plugins that are often used for vocals, delays, like a mono delay is very popular. Using reverb, there's great, we have a great revelation and reverence for reverb. So this is a convolution reverb where it's based upon samples of different reverb halls, and this is algorithmic, where it's kind of generating those particular algorithms. A lot of people will use dynamics. So if you want to open up like a vintage compressor, that's a great plugin for delay for vocals. Another one that could be very helpful under dynamics is when we come here to the de-esser. So if you have like a vocalist that has a lot of sibilant frequencies that are like really annoying with the mic, you could do de-essing, and some basic EQ. So when you go to the channel settings, the basic EQ is really helpful. A lot of people will just do kind of high pass filters or low cut. You could just do here to kind of get rid of rumbles. You could also, on a particular frequency, if you know the key of a particular song, like you're like, okay, this song is in the key of G, you could, double click here and type in the particular frequency if you want to by note name. So if I just say G4, and then that way you could have the EQ kind of focused on the key of the song. So those are some plugins that you can check out for vocals, but these plugins will work for, virtually any audio source as well. So, but those are a lot of common plugins that people would use for vocals. All right, so just kind of clean this up a little bit and go to the next question. Okay, so we see a question, how to activate Cubase Pro 10. You upgraded from LEAI. So once you have like the USB-E licenser, that would go directly into, you could connect it to the E-licenser control panel. And at this point, you could just see, you know, an enter activation code. I have the program running, and then you'll see the code for your update. And at that point, you could just enter that code in and authorize it. And then just once that code is authorized, it'll look for your Cubase LE or AI license. Once that code has been, finds that license, it'll activate the new license, and you download and install it, and you're pretty much all set. Okay, so getting onto our vertical scrolling. So it says maybe it was horizontal scrolling instead of vertical. So what you could do if you're doing, let's just jump to a particular project here. If you want to do horizontal scrolling, and we could just use kind of the mouse scroll wheel again, and just hold down the shift key. So let's say if I'm here and I wanted to scroll, just hold down the shift key and scroll up and down using your scroll wheel. You could do that. There's also just this little, you could grab this little line right here in between. But again, just the shift key to go horizontally, no shift key to go vertically. So if you wanted to, and if you wanted to zoom, you know, you could do that as well. So shift key would allow you to scroll, you know, horizontally using the scroll wheel, and vertically without the shift key. Okay, so let's go through some more questions. Thanks again for everyone's patience. Try to get to as many questions as we can. Okay, it says, hello, Greg and all. I have a quick question. Why in audio connections I can only exclusively have connected either a control room? I think we already covered that with the exclusive preference. Okay, so we have a question. How do you link machine to Groove Agent 5, whereas the note repeat will work? So when we open up an instance of Groove Agent 5, so I'll just come here when we'll open up the full Groove Agent version. All right, so within Groove Agent 5, we have a number of different functions. So let's just say, we'll open it up here. And if you go to the Perform tab, all right, and then we could activate this. So what this is really looking for is, you know, you could have different performance patterns, and this will do note repeats. And all these are doing is actually just triggered by these particular MIDI notes. So it's going to be kind of out of the range of a lot of instruments. So let's say if I'm playing this a little bit here, and I wanted to take just this pattern here, and let's see if I could figure out what MIDI note I'm hitting. I'm just going to open up the keyboard here. So once I have this activated, I could just kind of, at this point, you know, once we have this activated, you could have the keys triggered by these particular. So I'm going to just take this in. So really all you need to do is to just have your machine controller just trigger these particular MIDI notes, like C5, C#5, D5, D#5. So you may have to adjust the MIDI note that's being transmitted from the particular keyboard. But at this point, you could just, select. So I will just come here and let's solo just a kick here, maybe. So let's say if I just come here. At that point you could have, different note repeat patterns if you wanted to have. But those are all just triggered from particular MIDI notes. So have your machine controller just, transmit those particular MIDI notes and you should be all set. Sorry about that. All right. So question, how do you change attributes in MediaBay? The parameters are red for me and I can't change them. So let's take a look at how to change or even add attributes in MediaBay. So if I wanted to come here, at this point, we want to make sure that you click on configure, and then you could have all these different attributes. So if you wanted to create your own attributes, like a lot of times I may have a sample library and you could have like, is this good or bad? And then, at this point you could say display name, yes, no. And at this point you could have your own kind of attributes that you can enable directly here, but you may not see it until you're actually here. And some attributes like, this will be for pad shop. So that's where that particular sound is generated from. And that sound's only going to work in pad shop. But on the right hand side, and if you don't see this, just click here on the icon, or you could do the setup and make sure that you see the attribute inspector. And as you kind of click in here, you could add those different attributes to your particular audio files just that easily. Okay, so we'll go through some more questions. Okay, we have Nick, who just kind of helped him out with the macro. Good to see you on a Hangout, Nick. Okay, just going through some more comments here. Okay, so we have just a comment. I use Cubase elements. Does the rules still apply? Any advice, guys? So yeah, any questions that you have on Cubase elements, the full version of Cubase may have more features, but we're take any Cubase question that you have on any version. Okay, going through some of the comments here. Okay, so question, why are big film composers not using Nuendo? Usually film composers are doing a lot of the creative task, like, creating parts. And Nuendo can be more designed for the person that's mixing the film or doing dialogue replacement, doing Dolby Atmos, doing, the mixing, as well as, field recorder input. So that's often not what the composer does. And a lot of the composers, have been running Cubase for, the 30 years that it's been out and just know it by heart. So the functions that kind of differentiate Cubase and Nuendo, are kind of someone else's task. Obviously as, workflows evolve, someone may be composing and doing all the sound and mixing and doing dialogue replacement for film, but a lot of the big film composers just compose the music and get that recorded, and that's incorporated with all the different sound elements in the film. And often Nuendo is used for that and for games and incorporating the music. So that's why a lot of the big film composers still run Cubase, because their needs don't go beyond what, you know, what is offered in Nuendo to differentiate it from Cubase. Okay, so question: how can I add effects to one vocal and elements without having to cut to new channels? So I'm not sure if this is in Elements, but you may be able to, you know, you could automate particular vocals. So let's say if I wanted to come here and I have a delay on the lead vocal here, and I just wanted to have a delay on one particular phrase. So I could just right click here, and I'm going to add, let's say, just a quick delay. Okay, so now when I come here, I want to adjust the delay. Let's make it just a quarter note delay. So if you have Cubase elements, one of the things that you could do is just, you know, automate the track. So at this point, we could click on the R and W here. So say I wanted to incorporate the delay. Now you're packing boxes, ready to leave. Our musical history laid out on the floor. So say I just now want to play that back. Boxes, ready to leave. Our musical history laid out on the floor. So you could just do automation of the sends to have, you know, without necessarily having to copy it to a separate track and process it differently. So that's an easy way, even in Cubase Elements, just to make that work for you. Okay, so so we see, could we get the option to invert the horizontal scrolling? Let's see if maybe we could do it with a mouse wheel. So this could be an operating system type of thing. Let's take a quick look, see if I get this. Usually it's not a problem, but let's say if I wanted to. So when I scroll this way, scroll up, it's going to go that way. When I come here again, so it seems like this works for me, and you could try this with your computer, and it may be different on Windows, but depending on the scroll direction, that could invert it for you. So give that a try, and I think that should do the trick for reverting. Okay, we have a question. Any risk to have the personalization wiped out from Cubase updates, MediaBay? So like MediaBay. So usually what happens is when you do an update, Cubase will extract all of the user information like presets and your audio routing, and generally that is automatically carried over to the new version. If it isn't, like sometimes people, depending on your user administrator account that it's assigned to, may have to manually copy over like the application data folder. And you could do that, but generally you don't have to worry about it. Cubase knows to look in your 9.5 and migrate all of your preferences and settings and working environment to 10. So generally you don't have to worry about that, but you could always manually copy if it doesn't. Okay, so we got comment back that It says, I tried right now and it works. This is with the Groove Agent and a note repeat set on machine and a pad MIDI out to host and transpose until it works. Okay. Is there any way to have multiple faders any way to move multiple faders simultaneously without linking tracks or sending said multiple faders to a group? A really great function for this, if you don't want to if you don't want to like permanently link different channels, if we select a number of channels, you could just activate quick link. So let's come to like more of it like just an audio project here. So let's say, sorry about hitting my headphones into the mic. All right, so if I just have a number of, audio tracks going on, so, what you could do is just take like these tracks here, and you could just hold down like Alt plus Shift, and that will turn on what's called Quick Link. So these don't have to be permanently linked, and now we could adjust like those particular channels just like that. So again, I could just say, okay, I want all these channels. You could also just turn on quick link, adjust, and then they're not linked. They're not, so quick link, and that's just Alt or Option plus Shift. So that is a really easy, fast way of doing that. So use a quick link. You don't have to assign it and do what components do I want linked. It's just like, these faders I want to group right now just for 10 seconds, do it, move it, and let go of the key command. And you should be all set. So yeah, so just do Alt Shift plus Quick Link, and then, all right. So we have Stanley from Poolsville, Maryland. Good to see you on the Hangout again. So question, will you make a DSP system for Cubase like Pro Tools HD, for example? Well, I think interface again. Sorry about that. Let me just exit out of Cubase. All right, I'm just going to test, see if you can hear me talking. I'm going to test, see. Okay, just bear with me a second. Sorry, I think most of this we had a weird IT update at our office that might be causing some of these issues ever since then. But let's see if I open up 9.5, if that triggers anything. try one more thing. Sorry about this. All right, we'll just see if we can maybe show some stuff in Nuendo. If we could get this. Sorry for this.